Okay, so today we've come to a very important part of the training program, and that is to learn how to answer questions without having an index path. In the past, I've taught you the 10 steps in using an index path to answer them. You developed good study habits from them. You became familiar with navigating the code book. You learned the organization, structure, and language of the code book. And you discovered, most importantly, the relationship between the question and the index path, and the index word that you use to look up in the index and then to find in the code book. So we've come to a point where we don't have the index path to lean on now. And the question becomes how to answer questions without that index path. Well, first, you should identify what type of question it is that you're reading. And I've discovered, or I've identified, 4 different types of questions. The first one is a general knowledge type question. The second one is a calculation type question, and those listed here are examples of a calculation. The third one are using important articles or tables that are most commonly referenced. The fourth type of question is a lookup question, and that's the most popular type of question that you'll receive on the test. So we're going to go through each of these and find out why it's important to identify the type of question it is. It helps you to have a method to answer these questions from, and it will help you also to anticipate the difficulty and the time that each question will take to answer. It also helps to find out and to identify what type of strategy that you will use for that question, and it helps you to zero in on the target and avoid rabbit trails, which are distractions from the answer, and black holes, which are the types of questions that you will answer with an excessive amount of time. So you don't want to do those. You want to avoid rabbit trails, and you want to avoid black holes, those types of questions that suck all your time out of the time that you're allotted. So answering the types of questions, number 1, a general knowledge type of question is for example, what is a megger? Through your experience, you might have the answer for that. It's a general knowledge type of question. It's a question that is not found generally in the code book and which draws on your general knowledge of the field. That you're expected to know those types of questions from 3 to 4 years of work in the field. A calculation type of question is a question that you could solve quickly by inserting variables into a formula and knowing how to resolve questions that require numbers, such as box fill and conduit fill. It's important that every electrician know Ohm's law and power law and how to use it. And that is an example of a type of question that could be easily answered if you know the steps to take and the formula to use. Another type of question is using important tables and articles that are commonly used. So if you memorize these commonly used tables and articles, you won't have to turn to them in the index to answer them. They will be fresh in your mind, and you could refer to them instantly once they're memorized. The last type of question that I've identified is the lookup question, and that's the most popular, and that takes the most amount of time. So those are questions that you have to identify the key word, find subtopics and topics in the index of the code book, and then turn to them. So first is to identify the type of question, And second is to use one or more of these lookup strategies. Now we will go through each of these in order, and I will give an explanation for each as we go along here. But these are the types of lookup strategies that I've identified and that you could use to find an answer without having the index pad. Reading the answer, reading the questions and the answers carefully to each question will help you to minimize reading errors, and it'll help you to maximize your comprehension of the question. For example, the standard ampere rating for fuses and inverse time circuit breakers consists of the following ratings except for A, 125, B, 175, C, 200, and D, 240. When most students read this question, the tendency is to skip over important words like except for. So it's important to read the question and the answers carefully, because the question or the answers might have clues in them as well. But most importantly, reading the question and answer carefully, you will catch keywords like except for. Also, it's a good idea to read with your lips. Read out loud. That will also keep you from skipping over important words. If you have to, read with your fingers and use your fingers to guide you through the question. And it'll help you to pace yourself as well and to keep you focused. So that's another thing that you could do, is to interact more physically with the question. Next is to identify the main topic and subtopics within the question. I call this the grammar school approach because it requires you to identify the subject of the question. Remember, when learning grammar, you had to identify the subject and the verb and the different parts of the question. Well, this is what you're doing when you're reading questions and you're taking your exam. It's the most common approach that you have to take when taking this exam. It will help you to identify the main topic and the subtopics to look for in the index. This requires a lot of practice and a lot of repetition. There's just no avoiding that. Most times it is easily to identify, the keyword are easily identified in the question, and they're pretty obvious as you read the questions. And the subtopics reveal themselves in the same way. Here are some examples. Storage batteries used as a source of power for emergency systems shall have a capacity to provide power for a minimum period of blank hours. Well, we're talking about storage batteries, and a subtopic of storage batteries, we're talking about the use of storage batteries in emergency systems. The second example, electric vehicle supply equipment is permitted to be installed in which of the following locations? So they're talking about the locations that electric vehicle supply equipment is to be used in. Last example is, overhead conductors for festoon lighting shall not be smaller than blank American wire gauge unless supported by messenger wire. Well, the subject of this question is festoon lighting, and a subtopic would be conductors. Practice is key. Remember the 10 steps that you used earlier. You took the same exam over and over and over again until you memorized the key path. It wasn't important at that time to memorize the answer, but you repeated the question over and over again. You took that same test over and over again so that you could remember what the key index path was. This repetition prepares you to find the main topic in the codebook index without an index path given to you. You'll pass this exam only with an excessive amount of practice and repetition. There's just no shortcuts to that. So practice is key. Another method that you could employ is to look for synonyms in the question. Synonyms are words that are similar but not the same. And use these synonyms when you look for them in the index. Here's a short list of synonyms that I've discovered along the way. And some examples are: a circuit breaker is similar to a fuse. So if you have a question that has a circuit breaker as the key word, and you can't find the answer using circuit breaker, you might want to look up fuse, or OCPD, overcurrent protection device. Another example, looking further down the list, is raceway and conduit. Sometimes the question will have conduit as the key word, but you can't find that in the index. Look up raceway instead. So these are examples of how you could use synonyms to look at different keywords in the index. Another example you could take is to look up the literal word. This is another strategy. Start someplace obvious. The key word might be just as simple as unused openings. And you have a 50-50 chance. So try looking up just the literal words in the question if you can't find a main topic to look for. So that might also help you. Also, to reverse the word order is another strategy. This is called speaking code. Code is a language. It's part of the interpreting of the code. And often you reference the same section will be referenced whether or not the word order, or whether the word order is one way or the other. For example, grounding electrodes versus electrodes grounding may reference the same section of the code book. Another example, you might see auxiliary gutters, and then a subtopic under that you'll see splices and taps. Or you might look up S for splices and taps, and you might see auxiliary gutters. So you can reverse the word order of your main and subtopics, and you may be able to find more references to look up and find the answer for the question that way. Next is to search for clues in the answers. This is called reverse engineering. So as you look for the answers and scan the article for these words. An example, when combination surface non-metallic raceways are used both for signaling and for power and lighting circuits, the different system shall be prohibited. B, run in the same compartment. C, separated by at least 1/2 inch. Or D, run in the separate compartments. Well, as you look up the reference, the index words here, and you go to the index, you go to that section in the code book, look for the keywords such as separate compartments, or separated by at least 1/2 inch, or look for words like same compartment or prohibited. So you're using the answers from the question to match in that section of the code book, and that also might help you to find the answer quickly. A great secondary source is the table of contents. It's an excellent source, a secondary source of information and topics. If you read the table of contents, read, review, study, become familiar with the table of contents, and it'll help you to understand how that is organized. It's organized by topic and subject. When you can't find the proper topic or subject in the index, you could refer to the table of contents. The table of contents also provides page numbers. Try to place that question in a chapter and then narrow your choices according to the article or part section. So I have an example here. When installing three-way or four-way switches, switching should be done A, only in the white conductor, B, only in the grounded circuit conductor, C, only in the ungrounded circuit conductor, and D, either the grounded or ungrounded circuit conductor. So you would use the table of contents and you would find that switches are under equipment for general use. That's chapter 4. And as you look down, you see article 404 identified as switches, and you turn to page 266. So that's the way of using the table of contents rather than the index. Well, what if, after turning to the codebook section, what if you can't find the answer? Well, first, make sure that you're at the proper article or table. That's very important. Try to get in the habit of reading the titles of your articles, knowing where you are, and the titles of your tables. Read the section and look for the answer, and you'll just have to move on. However, if you can't find the answer, a key point is to scan the bold section headings before and after the address. Scan for matching words and phrases from the questions or answers, and don't read until you have to. Watch the time. Make sure that you're not off on a rabbit trail or in a black hole. And if you can't find the answer, you just have to move on, mark it, and move on. You may find clues in the questions that follow. So don't spend a lot of time on it. Just mark it and move on to the next question, because the next questions might give you clues to answer this question, or because you're not thinking of this question that you're having trouble with, you might find that you remember more easily you might find a clue to this question in the next questions that follow. Another strategy that you could take is drawing on your experience. However, be careful, because you may have done something wrong for many years, or you may have had a bad assumption for many years. So try to verify your hunch using the codebook, but nonetheless try to draw on your experience the best you can. Lastly is, if you can't find the answer, you'll just have to guess. But I want to emphasize to guess wisely. Expect to find questions that are like this. Expect to find questions that you're not familiar with. That's just the nature of this exam. Try to employ process of elimination. Look at the answers and try to eliminate one or more answers. If you have to guess, use the same letter to guess. And make sure that you answer all the questions. There will usually be a somewhat, the answers will be distributed evenly somewhat. So it is possible to guess the wrong answer on 25 questions or 100 questions. But if you choose the same letter for all the questions, you're likely to get more than one right. So that's a strategy that I use. You'll just have to guess, answer it, mark it, and examine the next question. So mark it and move on. That's just the nature of it. However, you don't want to guess it, and you want to be so prepared that you don't have to guess, and that comes through practice. Well, I hope these strategies will help you, and practice is key.